Oh, here we go. It's live. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to QuickTime Event, hosted by Middle of Nowhere Gaming. I am your strong Finch, Sean Richards, and joining me is the ever so great Jordan Luffler,
Hello.
and again, Adam Leonard.
What's happening, y'all?
All right. For the uninitiated, QuickTime Event is our time topical podcast. Usually, we will go on for hours on end just talking about a single topic. So, in order to keep that from happening on a recorded podcast, we have shortened ourselves to a strict time limit that we will hopefully always abide to, even though that never happens.
Now we're going to do it.
And now we are going to do it. All right? And this is a slightly special QuickTime Events because we are talking about the game of the generation so far. Now, here are the restrictions for Game of the Gen, as I'm sure Adam and Jordan know.
Mm-hmm.
We are only looking at Wii U, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC games after 2013. Only those will make the countdown. If games are a remaster or a remake, then they are not qualified for this list. They have to come out before or at the same time as they were released on other consoles. Also, we are not looking at handheld exclusives, so any iOS, Android, 3DS, or Vita games, sorry, what Vita games, that come out.
Basically, you're excluding Persona 4 Golden.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
So, any of those games will not make the countdown. However, everything else that I just listed is fair game. So, we have 5 minutes for everyone's game of the year. Plus, we'll throw out a little bit of a quick fire. And that will give us a total of 20 minutes on the clock. Adam, are you ready?
I am.
Jordan, are you ready?
Ready, steady.
All right, we will start with Adam. In 3, 2, 1.
Game of the generation, without question, is Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. It was a real big burst of fresh air when it was released in September of 2014. It came during a period of time where we as gamers were kind of exhausted by many games coming out promising like these huge, overhyped AAA titles that failed to meet our expectations. Particularly games like Thief and Watch Dogs are, very like stark examples of the problem that was going on at that time, and a lot of games that were, announcing really quickly out of the gate and getting delayed. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor was a game that kind of quietly crept its way along, very humbly. Monolith Games talked about how they had this little Lord of the Rings game they were making, and they promised some really cool innovation, which the game itself lived up on. So it was really nice to see a game that was underhyped come to exceed expectations. Big thing for me, like when I look at the next generation and what I'm going to try to pick as right now my best game of this generation, is innovation, because I want to see with a new generation, I want to see where games are headed. What can you show me that's new? Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor definitely brought that in its Nemesis system. For those of you who don't know what the Nemesis system is, essentially Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor has like a central bad guy, but supporting the central bad guy is an entire army of bad guys that are led in various different factions, and these factions have these leaders, like these randomly kind of generated leaders, sort of, that are basically their own living, breathing characters. They have weaknesses, they have strengths, and they form relationships with your character. If you go on and you lose to one of these people, they will remember next time, and they'll sit there and make fun of you for the fact that they've killed you. Sometimes you can try to kill them and they get away, only for them to come back with a vengeance, bearing the scars from the battle you've had with them before. The cool thing is, as you kill these leaders, the ranks shift around. People get promoted. People become leaders who weren't leaders before. I think this is really like a really a next gen game changing concept, which Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor showed a whole lot of promise with in the system. Also, the system added a real sense of risk and reward to the game. Like dying really felt like it mattered in Shadow of Mordor, because if you died, you oftentimes would lose a lot of the progress you made tackling down the armies of Mordor, because people would essentially fill the slots of all the bad guys you've defeated, and so you had to be very careful with very careful with how you proceeded, because dying could seriously put you back. Um, the it was also a game, like, once again with the risk. It was a very unsafe game because Mordor was a very big, dangerous place, and you had to very much kind of take into account your surroundings and plan your battles very carefully, because if you just went into something willy-nilly, you would find yourself dying very quickly. I also think that Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is kind of an important game because, while not the only game doing this, it's one of the top examples of good, intelligent use of pre-existing IP. It's kind of a general joke among the video game community that most video games based on televisions or movies or like properties are usually awful. Shadow of Mordor is a game that kind of changes that and kind of proves that you can make a great game based upon a pre-existing IP. And the way it partially does that is it doesn't marry itself to the previous stories that take place in Middle-earth, nor over-marry itself to the characters that exist within Middle-earth. It simply uses kind of Middle-earth and some of the characters as kind of a prompting point of a story you might be able to tell, and then simply then goes on to do its own thing. I think many games would benefit if they learned the lessons from games like this and South Park: The Stick of Truth and Arkham Knight. The
Women.
entire arc. And Jordan brought up a really good point, because I will, in all roundness, I will address, I think, kind of the weaknesses of Middle Earth Shadow of Mordor are these: is its story is fine, but it's nothing to write home about. But it's a competent story. The boss fights are probably the biggest sore point, because the boss fights are a little underwhelming. A little, they attempt not to build to the epic climax you might hope, and they're not nearly as fascinating as the Nemesis system. And finally, I ultimately think that Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is a game that will be surpassed by a sequel or another game that's going to eventually take what Middle-earth has set forth in its Nemesis system and will take it the next step forward in creating something truly spectacular, which gives us something to look forward to in the generation to come. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor.
Damn.
Well, not a lot of time for discussion, I guess. But now it's on to my game, and I'm going to pick a little bit of an indie title right now. I'm going to pick Transistor for Game of the Generation. And I'm picking Transistor because not only is it one of the most beautiful games I have ever played in my entire life, but it mixes both action and strategy RPGs to a point where I really fell in love with it. Anyone who's played Fallout 3 or looks forward to Fallout 4 knows what I'm talking about when I say a mixture between action RPGs and strategy RPGs. Because you can stop time, lay out your plan of how you want to attack, and then go for it. Another reason I think Transistor is a good game for the gen is its storytelling. It's got a nice, deep story, and it tells it not just in cutscenes, which there are, but also it tells it in certain terminals that you can interact with. It tells its story in its actual gameplay mechanics. Whenever you defeat enemies or you get a new ability, you can whenever you unlock that ability, you can read about the person that ability comes from. For example, Red, the protagonist, she has her own little story behind her, and you read that through one of the attacks that she can pull off. I feel like that is one of the greatest things I love about it. It mixes storytelling and gameplay in a way that I have not seen. And not only is it beautiful, not only is it innovative, but it's also a game that I would love to see more of. Bastion may have set Supergiant Games on the map, but Transistor surpassed it in every way it can. I've left about 3 minutes so you guys can discuss.
Yeah, from what I played of Transistor, I agree with a lot of what you said. I thought it was very beautiful. And actually, I think it's an awesome comparison for you to make to Fallout 4. Even though the games are very different, the fact that you can pause time and be very strategic is really cool. It's one of my favorite parts of Fallout 3. What I kind of wish was in Skyrim. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but I want VATS in Skyrim. But if I could like have something like that in any game, like Transistor, it adds a certain element to the action, and then you get to see it play out, and it's very satisfying.
And if you do want any weaknesses, there are weaknesses. It being an indie game, it is really short, and it does have a few challenge rooms, and the ending result is not as good. I mean, it's not the perfect story. It's intriguing. It'll take you to the end, but the end result is fairly anticlimactic.
You know, I like the gameplay and I love the style. I guess I would say if I had any bone to pick with Transistors, I suppose I did find it a little obtuse, both in story and in game itself. I mean, it could have benefited from maybe just a little more explanation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Maybe in a sequel. You never know.
That'd
Yeah,
be awesome.
I
Yeah.
am all up for that.
And I don't know that the length of the game is necessarily a con against it, especially since it's not a $60 game. You know.
I understand that, but I mean, it being an RPG or an RPG light, as you could call it. I mean, it makes me feel like, okay, I need to take on more enemies. But here, it just feels, even though it is linear, I would love to see it in an open world setting. And even though it is short and you may feel like it's obtuse, it's just, to me, it felt like it was short. Could have used a little bit more time to explain a few things instead of just giving us a bit of broader concepts.
Yeah, I think that the fact that you want to have more of the game isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like saying that you'd want a sequel or that you'd want like an expansion or whatever, like just playing more of the game is actually, I think, a good sign.
And I would point out that I think you can have a short, you can have a short RPG without that being like a major shortcoming. I would say that South Park: Stick of Truth was a fairly short RPG game, but by the end, could I have played more of it? Yes, but did I feel like I got my value out of the game for what it gave to me and the time that it gave it? Yes.
All right.
Cool.
We're going to skip over this and we'll go to Jordan. Jordan, what is your game of the gen?
All right, my game of the generation, and to break away from the multi-party, third-party indie crowd here, I went with a first-party game. Bloodborne, I think, is the game of the generation so far. This is what I love about Bloodborne. First off, just to preface, I am not a Dark Souls veteran whatsoever, so anything that I say is basically my experience with Bloodborne, not necessarily what is borrowed from its previous iterations. But what I think Bloodborne does well is its setting is incredible. The city, the sky, I mean, it's ever present. But like the imagery that they use, it's just cohesive. It's dark. It's beautiful, and like every hallway, like I've never crept through a game. I've never walked through a game as much as I do in Bloodborne. Like corner peeked as much as I do in Bloodborne, just because every corner, every hallway has something that can jump out at you that could get you. They can kill you. Every battle is life or death. And like it's just the setting just takes that and throws it at you constantly and makes you feel it. Every area that you go into feels like it's the same world as the city, as the forest, as the graveyard. All these places feel like they're one place. I would say, kind of going into the combat, I think the combat is great. I love that it's satisfying, it's reactive. I think that each battle is almost like a puzzle. Like each enemy that you encounter has their own strengths and weaknesses, which is common in every game. But you have to really learn their moves and learn their timing and stuff like that, and you can master them. And when you beat them, you feel good about it because you've conquered like a mountain with every enemy. And there's a good risk and reward system. When you attack someone and they hit you, you lose health, but you can go back at them and regain some of that health by causing damage to them, which is, I think, a really good addition to the Souls series, where, I mean, it's a difficult game series, but this kind of lessens it a little bit more and actually increases the speed of the combat. It makes you want to go at an enemy rather than be cautious. I think actually one of the greatest strengths of Bloodborne, though, is that it has this sort of culture that they've built. It's actually a very guarded game. Like, everything that you need to, every bit of information, like all the way down to how to actually play the game, is not really explained to you. It doesn't want to tell you anything, but you have to find it for yourself, which a lot of people don't like, but I actually really appreciate it because, again, it's a rewarding aspect. It really makes you investigate every little nook and cranny, but also, like, each item that you pick up has a description on it that lends itself to the story and feels like it fits perfectly into everything else. And it's not just the game that has this sort of culture, it's the people that play it. So, like, when you are playing with someone else, or you meet just a stranger in the world, you want a cooperator or something like that for a boss or an area, everyone always greets each other, and there's like no communication between each other besides like these emotions, emoticons, or whatever the hell they're called, just gestures like bowing or the hunter's salute and stuff like that. Like, everybody
About 1 minute.
And even when you're going up against another player, like when they invade your world, they make sure to bow to you. Like, they want to make sure you know that they're there, that you know their presence, and that it's almost like a fair fight. It's really strange. I've never encountered it in any other game where people basically just want to sneak up on you and stab you in the back. In Bloodborne, it never really feels that way. I would say, though, that the greatest weakness of the game is definitely its, now, since loading screens have basically been fixed, is that the multiplayer feels lacking. They definitely created a game where they purposely made it so that you can't play with other players as much as you might like. Cooperation makes the game a lot easier, so they try to limit that by limiting how often you can play with other people. And it can be a little frustrating because if you want to play with somebody else, you have to wait a long time. So.
They should have really built in like an extra piece of time to respond to each other's.
Well, that's why I did like the 5 minutes, but now we're into the quick fire section, and we'll basically just throw out a bunch of games that we think are also contenders for Game of the Gen. Some others that I have heard are The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt.
Amazing storytelling.
Dragon Age. What?
I said amazing storytelling.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dragon Age Inquisition.
Again, amazing storytelling. I love that game.
And we don't want to exclude the Wii U out of this stuff, so I definitely want to include Super Smash Brothers for Wii U.
For sure. Great party game.
And also Mario Kart 8.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people want to throw out Bayonetta 2 as well.
Sure.
That's fair.
Personally, I agree with both of you guys. And also, I think there's a new contender that was just released a few days ago. Batman Arkham Knight.
If you're playing on a certain system, yes.
Yeah, right. If you're not, as long as you don't have the PC version of that.
Yeah. Well, it depends. You can't play the PC version of Bloodborne, Jordan, so...
That's true.
Well, there you go.
The future will tell how the PC version of Arkham Knight turns out. I don't know that it's fair to necessarily throw out a review of Arkham Knight on PC just yet.
Yeah, broken version of it, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, you can't find it on PC anymore, so.
personally, my quickfire, I mean, Dragon Age was one of my top ones. I'm still working through The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. I've been addicted to Bloodborne, but I'm working on getting back to The Witcher 3. Um, but also, as far as indie games go, no indie game has hooked me as well as The Swapper. Um, just so great. Like, the storytelling is minimal, but you hardly notice it because just like the atmosphere, the puzzles, um, and the language, the dialogue is just awesome. That game totally took me by surprise, and I love it.
Can I take a moment and like hop on a soapbox for a little game that I'd like to champion?
Shoot.
I think this game is such a special game, and I think it didn't quite get the attention or the reviews that I thought it deserved. I think that the game Valiant Hearts: The Great War was an incredibly like amazing and like emotionally moving game, and it's a game that actually finds a way to actually, it's like a, first of all, it's a war game where you're not just like pointing down the barrel at like soldiers and just like firing away.
Yep.
And it's a game that actually manages to be like educational and actually kind of teach you the context of what was going on during World War One, why War One happened, why it was just so messed up. And it was like something I've just never really seen before in a game. And the fact that it came from like Ubisoft, like a big AAA studio, lets some people go off and make their little quirky passion project, which is kind of like a puzzler game that takes place during World War One. I think that's kind of outstanding. That was kind of astounding, and I think that's a really underrated and kind of fantastic game that came out this generation.
Yeah, I agree, man. That's absolutely true. The game is just beautiful.
Yeah,
That
the
reminds
ending of
me.
that gets me every time.
That reminds me, Child of Light was also another one that was big from an
Mhm.
Ubisoft.
Yep, yeah, that was pretty cool too.
And one more that I kind of want to throw out. You just remind me of something. Counter Spy. I found to be really fun.
Okay.
And
I have not picked that one up yet, actually. I've been really interested in it, and I think it was a PlayStation Plus at some point. I need to play it.
yeah, the reason I'm throwing that one out there is not just because of the whole gameplay aspect, which I really loved, and because I'm a really big fan of the procedural generated
Yep.
roguelike games, but also I love the Dark Deco, like
Hmm.
Batman animated series esque animation.
Yeah, that game was cool.
Any
Very
more?
cool. I'm fresh out. I'm very
We're
picky
done.
about. I'm very picky about
Yep,
my
that's what
games.
I got.
Well, seems like we finished on time this time.
Woo!
Um,
Told
All
you.
right.
so you have heard all of our possible games of the generation. What are your games, fellows of the internet? If you want to, you can submit them at contact.mong@gmail.com. Be sure to include some strong arguments, and you may possibly win a copy of this game. 2 weeks after this podcast comes out, we will tally up all the votes, and we will see who will win their game of the generation.
Yeah,
So,
we might even put it up, some of the submissions up on the website too. So
Ooh,
yeah,
exciting.
we could even read some out on the podcast. The possibilities are endless.
yeah, so we're gonna call it Friday, July 24th is the deadline.
All right. So July 24th, please get your submissions in by then. And until next time, this is QuickTime Events by Middle of Nowhere Gaming. If you want to read more about us, you can always visit our website, middleofnowheregaming.com. You can find us on Twitter at Mong Network, or at Mong.com is another one. You will find us on Facebook at Middle of Nowhere Gaming. You will find us on Twitch at Mong Plays. You'll also find our YouTube channel, Mong Network, and Mong Plays. We have two of them. And you can find us individually even. Adam, your Twitter handle is...
Fanboy_Adam.
Okay. Jordan?
It's at JL_FLEUR. It's JL Fleur.
All right. And mine is Little Big Ham on Twitter. So, until next time, Mong?
Wrong.